I didn't expect the message to come at 7:42 in the morning. Not from my daughter. Not like that. We've decided we're going to distance ourselves from you. Please don't look for us anymore. I read it twice. Then a third time. The words didn't change, but something inside me did. It wasn't just the sentence. It was the tone. Cold. Final. Detached. And I knew immediately those weren't her words. Not entirely. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't rush. I had learned over the years that reacting emotionally only gives control to the person trying to provoke you. So I set my phone down, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a cup of coffee like it was any other morning. But it wasn't. Because my daughter, Emily, had just cut me out of her life. Or at least she thought she had. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the quiet suburban street I had lived on for over 20 years. I remembered when Emily used to ride her bike up and down that same road, laughing fearless, always looking back to make sure I was watching. I was always watching. Always there. Always giving. And maybe that was the problem. The phone buzzed again. Another message, shorter this time. Please respect our decision. Our. Not hers. Not Emily. That was Daniel. Her husband. The man who had slowly, carefully inserted himself into every corner of her life, until there was barely any space left for me. I picked up the phone again, finally ready to respond. I didn't type fast. I didn't hesitate either. No problem. I'm going to cancel the automatic payments for your house and car. And I'll let you know when it's all finalized. I hit send and placed the phone face down on the table. No anger. No insults. No begging. Just truth. Because here's the part no one talks about. Independence sounds beautiful until you realize it's being funded by someone else's sacrifice. That house they lived in? I bought it. Not rented. Bought. I had worked 2 jobs for years after my husband passed away, saved every dollar, made every careful decision so that one day my daughter wouldn't have to struggle the way I did. The car in their driveway? Also mine. Paid in full. Registered under my name, because Daniel's credit wasn't exactly reliable when they first got married. Even their monthly expenses. I had quietly helped more times than I could count. Groceries. Insurance. Unexpected bills. I never kept score. I never asked for anything in return. Except respect. And now I had my answer. 3 hours passed before my phone rang. I knew it was her before I even looked. Emily flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. Her voice came through tight and uncertain. Mom. What do you mean you're canceling everything? I leaned back in my chair, my tone steady. Exactly what I said. That's not fair, she said quickly, almost defensively. We just need space. That doesn't mean. Doesn't mean what? I asked calmly. There was a pause. That doesn't mean you stop supporting us, she finally said. Her voice softer now, like she realized how it sounded but didn't know how to fix it. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that sentence settle. You want distance, I said slowly. I'm giving it to you. That's not what I meant, she insisted. You're taking this the wrong way. No, I replied, opening my eyes and staring straight ahead. For the first time, I'm taking it the right way. Silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end. Fast. Uneven. She wasn't used to this version of me. The one who didn't immediately fold, didn't rush to fix things, didn't apologize just to keep the peace. Daniel thinks, she started. And there it was. I'm not talking to Daniel, I interrupted, still calm. I'm talking to you. Another pause. Longer this time. He's my husband, she said, almost as if she was reminding herself. And I'm your mother, I replied. But apparently that doesn't matter anymore. That's not true, she said quickly, but there was no strength behind it. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Then explain the message, I said. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. Because deep down she knew exactly what I knew. That message wasn't written from love. It was written from influence. From pressure. From someone who wanted me out of the picture. And for a long time, I had allowed it. I had ignored the small signs. The subtle changes. The way Daniel would speak for her in conversations. The way Emily would look at him before answering simple questions, like she needed permission. I told myself it was normal, that marriages change people, that she was just adjusting. But this wasn't adjustment. This was control. "Mom," she said finally, her voice breaking slightly, "can we just talk about this later?" "We are talking about it now," I said. "I don't want to fight." "I'm not fighting," I replied. "I'm setting boundaries." Another silence. I could almost picture her, pacing in the living room of the house I paid for, holding the phone with both hands, glancing toward Daniel for guidance. That thought alone made something inside me shift again. Not anger. Clarity. "Emily," I said gently, my tone softening just enough to reach her. "You made a decision this morning." "We made a decision," she corrected quietly. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Then you need to live with it." "That's not fair," she whispered. "Neither is being cut out of your own daughter's life," I replied. She didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. "I'll handle the cancellations today," I continued, my voice steady again. "You'll receive notifications from the bank and the dealership." "Mom, please. Take care of yourself," I said, and then I ended the call. I sat there for a moment, the silence in the house almost overwhelming. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful, because I had finally stopped holding on to something that was already slipping away. I picked up my coffee, now cold, and took a small sip anyway. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. There were calls to make, decisions to finalize, loose ends to tie. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of respect for myself. Because if my daughter wanted to learn what distance truly meant, I was ready to show her. Enjoying the story? Subscribe for more. I locked the front door behind me and stood there for a second, feeling the weight of what I had just set in motion. This wasn't an empty threat. I wasn't trying to scare her into calling back and apologizing. I meant every word I said. And that's what made it different this time. I got into my car, started the engine, and sat there as the radio quietly filled the silence. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady, but my thoughts were anything but calm. Memories don't just disappear when someone hurts you. They get louder. Emily at 5 years old, running into my arms after her first day of school. Emily at 16, crying over her first heartbreak while I sat beside her all night. Emily on her wedding day, holding my hands and whispering, "I'll always need you, Mom." I believed her. Maybe that was my mistake. I pulled out of the driveway and headed straight to the bank. No hesitation. No second guessing. If I stopped now, if I gave myself time to soften, I knew I might back down. And I couldn't afford that anymore. By the time I walked into the bank, I had already rehearsed the conversation in my head. Calm. Clear. No unnecessary explanations. The woman at the desk greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel a series of automatic payments," I said. She nodded and began typing. "Of course. Can you provide the account details?" I handed everything over without a single tremor in my hand. Months of payments. Years actually. All tied to one address. One household. One life that I was no longer a part of. As she reviewed the information, she glanced up at me briefly. "Are you sure you want to cancel all of these? Some of them are set up for long-term commitments." "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm sure." She didn't ask any more questions after that. It took less than 15 minutes. 15 minutes to undo years of quiet support. When I walked out of the bank, the air felt different. Lighter somehow. Not because I was happy, but because something heavy had finally been set down. But I wasn't done yet. Next stop was the dealership. The car Emily drove had been a gift. At least that's how I presented it at the time. But legally it was still mine. I had kept it that way intentionally, telling myself it was just for security. Deep down, maybe I always knew this day could come. The man at the dealership recognized me. "Mrs. Carter, good to see you again. What can we do for you?" "I need to begin the process of reclaiming a vehicle under my name," I said. His smile faded slightly, replaced with a more professional expression. "Of course. Is there an issue?" "No issue," I replied calmly. "Just a change in arrangement." He nodded and guided me through the steps. "Paperwork. Verification. Scheduling. Do you want us to notify the current driver?" he asked. I paused for a fraction of a second. No, I said. I'll handle that. Because this wasn't about blindsiding her. This was about accountability. By the time I left the dealership, my phone had already lit up with missed calls. Emily. Again and again. And one new name. Daniel. I didn't answer. Not yet. Some conversations need to happen at the right moment, not the most emotional one. I drove home in silence, letting the weight of everything settle properly this time. The house greeted me the same way it always did, quiet, still, familiar. But I wasn't the same person who had left it earlier that morning. I placed my keys on the table and finally picked up my phone. 10 missed calls. 3 voicemails. 5 messages. I opened Emily's messages first. Mom, please call me back. This is going too far. You're overreacting. We need to talk about this like adults. I let out a small humorless breath at that last line. Like adults. Interesting choice of words. Then I opened Daniel's message. We need to have a conversation. This isn't how you handle family matters. There it was. Not a request. A statement. An attempt at control. For a moment I just stared at the screen. Then I did something I had never done before. I typed a reply to him. This is between me and my daughter. Stay out of it. I sent it before I could reconsider. The phone rang almost immediately. Daniel. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. A third time. Declined. Then silence. Finally, I set the phone down and walked into the living room, lowering myself onto the couch as the quiet wrapped around me again. But this time it wasn't peaceful. It was tense. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. About an hour later there was a knock at the door. Not soft. Not hesitant. Sharp. Urgent. I didn't need to check who it was. I already knew. I walked to the door, took a slow breath and opened it. Emily stood there, her face flushed, eyes slightly red like she had been crying. Behind her, a few steps back, stood Daniel. Arms crossed. Jaw tight. Exactly as I expected. Mom, Emily said, her voice breaking the moment she saw me. What are you doing? I didn't step aside. I didn't invite them in. I'm respecting your decision, I replied calmly. This isn't what we meant, she said quickly, stepping closer. You're taking everything away. No, I said, meeting her eyes. I'm taking back what was never yours to begin with. That hit her. I saw it in the way her expression shifted. Daniel stepped forward slightly. With all due respect, this is unnecessary. We asked for space, not financial punishment. I turned my gaze to him slowly. And with all due respect, I said, my voice firm but controlled, you don't get to define the terms of a relationship you just walked away from. His jaw tightened further. Emily looked between us, clearly overwhelmed. Can we please just go inside and talk? I shook my head. No. That single word seemed to surprise both of them. We talk right here, I continued. No more hiding behind comfort. Emily swallowed hard. Mom, please. You sent a message telling me not to look for you anymore, I said. So why are you here? She opened her mouth but no words came out, because the answer was obvious. Not love. Not reconciliation. Fear. Real, undeniable fear of what independence actually looks like without a safety net. Daniel finally spoke again, his tone sharper now. This is emotional manipulation. I almost smiled. No, I said quietly. This is reality. The silence that followed was heavy, unavoidable. And for the first time since this all began, I could see it clearly in Emily's eyes. Doubt. Not about me, but about him. And that changed everything. Make sure to tell in the comments where you are listening from. The air between us shifted so subtly that if I hadn't known my daughter as well as I did, I might have missed it. Emily didn't step back toward Daniel this time. She stayed where she was, closer to me. It was small, almost invisible, but it was real. Daniel noticed it too. I saw it in the way his posture stiffened, the way his eyes narrowed just slightly as he looked at her instead of me. He wasn't used to losing ground, not even an inch. Emily, he said, his voice controlled but firm, we should go. This isn't productive. She didn't move. Emily, he repeated, sharper this time. I'm not done talking, she said quietly. That was the first time she had pushed back. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. And that was all it took to expose the cracks. I stayed silent, letting the moment breathe. This wasn't about me speaking anymore. It was about her finally hearing herself. Daniel exhaled slowly, clearly trying to maintain control. We've already discussed this. There's nothing more to say. There is, she replied, her voice trembling but steadying with each word. Because I don't think I fully understood what we were doing. I watched him carefully now. His patience was thinning. This isn't the place for this conversation, he said. Let's go home. Home. The word hung in the air like a question, because suddenly it didn't sound as solid as it used to. Emily shook her head slightly. No. I need to understand something first. He didn't like that. Not one bit. What do you need to understand? He asked, his tone tightening. She hesitated, then glanced at me for just a second. Not for permission. Not for approval. For strength. I didn't say anything. I didn't nod. I just stood there, steady, letting her know she wasn't alone without taking control away from her. She turned back to him. When we sent that message this morning, whose idea was it? The question landed harder than anything else that had been said so far. Daniel blinked, clearly caught off guard. We talked about it together. That's not what I asked, she said. There was a slight edge in her voice now. New, unfamiliar, but necessary. He shifted his weight, crossing his arms again. It was a mutual decision. Emily shook her head again, this time more firmly. No. You brought it up first. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Telling. And I agreed, she continued, her voice quieter now. Because you said it was the only way we could move forward. I felt something twist in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. This was her moment. Daniel's jaw tightened. I said it would be healthier for us to have boundaries. Boundaries, she repeated. Or distance. They're the same thing. No, she said, looking him directly in the eyes now. They're not. That hit him. I could see it. Because for the first time he didn't have an immediate response. Emily took a slow breath, like she was finally allowing herself to think clearly. You told me my mom was too involved, she said. That she was controlling. That we couldn't build our own life if she was always there. I stayed still, even as those words landed. Not because they didn't hurt, but because this wasn't about defending myself. It was about truth revealing itself. Daniel let out a short breath. I said we needed independence. And how were we independent? She asked. With her paying for our house? Our car? Helping with bills whenever we needed it. He didn't answer. Because there wasn't a good one. Emily's voice grew steadier. You never had a problem with that part. That's different, he said quickly. How? She asked. Another pause. Longer this time. More uncomfortable. Because the answer was obvious. It wasn't different. It was convenient. And now that convenience was gone. You're twisting this, Daniel said finally, his tone sharper again. This isn't about money. Then why are we here? Emily asked. That question echoed in the space between us. Because it cut straight through everything else. If it wasn't about money, if it wasn't about control, then what was it really about? Daniel looked at her, searching for something. Control, agreement, submission, but he didn't find it. Not this time. We came here to fix this situation, he said. No, Emily replied softly. We came here because the situation changed. I watched her closely now. She wasn't the same girl who had sent that message in the morning. Something had shifted. Not completely, but enough. You told me she was manipulating me, Emily continued, her voice quieter but more certain. That she was trying to keep control over our lives. Daniel didn't deny it. Because he couldn't. You said we needed to cut ties to prove we could stand on our own, she said. And we can, he replied quickly. Can we? She asked. Another silence. This one louder than all the others. Because now, the question wasn't rhetorical. It was real. And it didn't have an easy answer. Emily looked down for a moment, then back up again. I didn't think about what that message would actually mean, she admitted. I didn't think about what it would do to her. Her eyes flickered toward me again just for a second. I just trusted you, she said to Daniel. That was the moment everything became clear. Not just to me. To her. Daniel stepped closer to her, lowering his voice slightly. Emily, you're emotional right now. You're not thinking clearly. I almost stepped in. Almost. But I didn't. Because she didn't need me to. I am thinking clearly, she said, taking a small step back from him. Probably for the first time in a while. That hit harder than anything else. Because it wasn't just about this moment. It was about everything leading up to it. The subtle shifts. The quiet influence. The slow erosion of her own voice. And now she was finding it again. Daniel's expression changed. Not anger. Not yet. Something else. Something closer to frustration mixed with urgency. Let's go home, he said again. But this time it sounded less like a suggestion and more like a command. Emily didn't move. Instead, she turned toward me fully. Mom, she started, her voice softer now, uncertain again. She didn't finish the sentence. Because there were too many things she could say. Too many things she should say. And maybe not enough courage yet to say them out loud. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I didn't step forward. I didn't make it easier for her. Because real choices aren't supposed to be easy. They're supposed to be honest. And honesty takes time. So I just stood there steady waiting. Not for an apology. Not for an explanation. But for the truth. And for the first time it felt like she was finally ready to face it. Enjoying the story? Subscribe for more. The silence stretched longer than before. But this time it wasn't empty. It was full of something fragile, something that could either break or finally come together. Emily took a slow breath, her shoulders rising and falling as if she was trying to steady herself from the inside out. I didn't mean it, she said finally, her voice low but clear. That message. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I didn't respond immediately. Because meaning and actions are not always the same thing. But you sent it, I said calmly. She nodded, her eyes dropping for a moment. Yeah, I did. Daniel shifted beside her, clearly uncomfortable with where this was going. Emily, you don't need to explain yourself like this. Yes, I do, she said, turning to him sharply. Because I'm starting to realize I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to. That sentence landed hard. Not just on him. On her too. She was hearing herself now. Really hearing herself. Daniel's tone tightened. We talked about this. You said you wanted space. I wanted space, she replied. Not this. She gestured slightly between me and her, like she was trying to define something that had gone too far to easily explain. I didn't say I wanted to cut her out completely, she continued. I didn't say I wanted to lose everything. I watched her carefully. Not the words. The realization behind them. Daniel let out a controlled breath. No one said anything about losing everything. You didn't have to, she said. It happened the moment we sent that message. He didn't answer. Because again there was no good answer. Emily turned back to me, her eyes softer now, but filled with something deeper than just emotion. Understanding. I didn't think about what it would feel like for you, she admitted. I didn't think about how final it would sound. It sounded exactly like what it was, I replied. She swallowed hard. I know, she said quietly. There was no defensiveness in her voice anymore. No excuses. Just acknowledgement. And that mattered. But it wasn't everything. Mom, she started again, hesitating. I don't want to lose you. The words hung in the air, fragile but honest. I held her gaze steady and calm. Then why did you send a message telling me not to look for you anymore? She didn't answer right away. Because this time she couldn't hide behind confusion. She had to face the truth. I thought it would make things easier, she said slowly. Between me and Daniel. There it was. Not anger. Not hatred. Convenience. And sometimes that hurts more. I nodded slightly. Easier for who? She closed her eyes briefly. Not for you, she admitted. No, I said quietly. Not for me. The silence that followed wasn't tense this time. It was heavy with truth. Daniel stepped forward again, his patience clearly running thin now. This is getting blown out of proportion. We're talking about one message. No, I said, my voice calm but firm. We're talking about what that message represents. He looked at me, irritation now fully visible. And what exactly does it represent to you? I met his gaze without hesitation. It represents a choice, I said. A very clear one. Emily looked between us again, but this time she didn't seem as lost. She was listening. Really listening. You don't get to ask for distance and still expect access, I continued. You don't get to walk away and still hold on to everything that comes with staying. Daniel scoffed lightly. So this is about control. No, I said. This is about boundaries. He shook his head. You're punishing her. I'm respecting her decision, I replied. There's a difference. Emily's eyes shifted slightly as she processed that, because deep down she knew which one was true. I didn't think it would go this far, she said softly. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't think. She flinched slightly at that, but she didn't argue, because it wasn't said to hurt her. It was said because it was true. Daniel stepped closer to her again, lowering his voice like he was trying to pull her back into his side. Emily, we don't need this. We can figure things out on our own. We don't need to depend on anyone. She looked at him, really looked at him. And are we ready for that? She asked. He didn't hesitate this time. Yes. But the confidence in his voice didn't match the reality of the situation. And she knew it. We haven't even tried, she said. We've been relying on her for everything. That's not true, he said quickly. It is, she replied. And you know it. Another crack. Another shift. Daniel's control was slipping and he could feel it. You're letting this situation cloud your judgment, he said. You're reacting emotionally. Emily shook her head slowly. No, she said. I think I've been ignoring reality. That hit deeper than anything else. Because it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her waking up to something she had been avoiding. She turned back to me again. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, she said. I know I can't just take back what I said. I didn't respond. Because she was right. Some things once said change everything. But I don't want this to be the end, she added, her voice quieter now. I studied her for a moment. Not as a child. Not as someone I needed to protect. But as an adult making a choice. You don't get both, I said finally. You don't get distance and connection on your terms only. She nodded slowly. I understand that now, she said. And for the first time, I believed her. Daniel exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated. So what now? Are we supposed to just accept all of this? I turned my gaze to him one last time. No, I said calmly. You're supposed to decide what kind of life you actually want. He frowned. What does that even mean? It means, I continued, if you want independence, then you take all of it. Not just the parts that are convenient. Emily's expression shifted again as those words settled in. Because now the choice was clear. Not blurred. Not influenced. Not softened. Clear. She looked at Daniel. Then at me. Then back at him again. And in that moment, I could see it. She was standing at a crossroads. Not between me and him. But between truth and comfort. And this time she couldn't pretend they were the same thing. Make sure to tell in the comments where you are listening from. The world didn't move. At least that's what it felt like in that moment. No cars passing. No wind. No distant noise. Just the three of us standing there, held in a silence that demanded a decision. Emily's eyes lingered on Daniel. He looked back at her, waiting, expecting, certain that she would step back into place like she always had before. But she didn't. Instead, she took a slow breath and asked the one question that changed everything. If we walk away from her completely, she said carefully, what does our life actually look like? Daniel blinked, clearly not expecting that. It looks like ours, he answered quickly. Independent. Free. No interference. That's not what I asked, she replied. I asked what it actually looks like. He hesitated. Just for a second. But that second was enough. Emily noticed. I noticed. And more importantly, he noticed that we noticed. We'll figure it out, he said, his tone slightly firmer now. That's what people do. With what? She asked. Savings? Stable income? A plan. He didn't respond immediately. Because for the first time the conversation wasn't emotional. It was practical. Real. Unavoidable. We've been managing just fine, he said finally. No, she said quietly. We haven't. She's been managing it for us. The truth landed, heavy and undeniable. Daniel's jaw tightened again. So what, you want to go back to being dependent? No, she said. I want to understand what independence actually means. That was the moment I knew she was no longer standing in the same place. She wasn't choosing sides. She was choosing awareness. And that's far more powerful. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice again, but this time there was an edge of urgency in it. Emily, you're overthinking this. We don't need to break everything apart just to prove something. I'm not trying to prove anything, she said. I'm trying to stop pretending. He went quiet, because that word hit deeper than anything else. Pretending. It stripped away every excuse, every justification, every carefully constructed explanation. What are you saying? He asked. Emily looked at him, really looked this time, not through emotion or influence but through clarity. I'm saying I agreed to something this morning without fully understanding it, she said. And now I do. And? He pressed. And now I need to make my own decision, she replied. That sentence changed the balance completely. Not just between them. Within her. Daniel let out a short, frustrated breath. We already made the decision. You made a suggestion, she corrected. I followed it. He stared at her, disbelief creeping into his expression. So now this is my fault? She shook her head slowly. No. It's mine too. I should have thought for myself. There was no anger in her voice, just honesty, and that made it harder to argue against. The silence returned, but it felt different now. Less heavy, more final. Emily turned toward me again, not as a child seeking comfort, not as someone trying to fix things quickly, but as someone ready to take responsibility. Mom, she said, her voice steady but soft, I can't undo what I said this morning. I didn't respond, because she was right. But I can decide what I do next, she continued. I held her gaze, waiting, not guiding, not influencing, just witnessing. She took another breath. I don't want to cut you out of my life, she said. But I also don't want to keep living the way we have been. I nodded slightly. Then don't, I said. She blinked like she wasn't expecting that answer. You don't need to choose between me and your independence, I continued. You need to understand what independence actually requires. Her expression shifted again. Not confusion. Understanding. You mean responsibility, she said. Yes, I replied. All of it. Daniel stepped in again, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. So what, she just walks away from everything we built? Emily turned to him, calm but firm. What did we build? She asked. He frowned. Our life. With what? She pressed. Be honest. He didn't answer. Because now honesty wasn't on his side. Emily didn't wait for a response this time. She already had her answer. She looked back at me. I'm not asking you to keep supporting us, she said. I understand why you're stopping. I studied her for a moment. She meant it. Not out of fear. Not out of pressure. But out of realization. And I'm not asking you to pretend nothing happened, she added. That mattered. More than any apology. Because it showed she understood the weight of her actions. I just don't want this to be the end, she finished. I took a slow breath. This was the moment. Not of emotion. Of decision. Then it won't be, I said. Her eyes softened, relief flickering across her face. But it won't be the same either, I continued. She nodded immediately. I know. And that's a good thing, I added. Because it was. Change isn't always loss. Sometimes it's correction. Daniel stepped back slightly now, clearly realizing the direction this was going. So what now? He asked, his voice quieter, less certain. Emily didn't look at him right away. She was still looking at me. Now, she said slowly, we figure out how to actually stand on our own. I nodded. That's where it starts. She took a small step forward, closer to me than she had been all day. Not fully closing the distance, but no longer keeping it either. And that was enough for now. Daniel remained where he was, silent, watching, processing. Because for the first time he wasn't leading the situation. He was reacting to it. And that shift would change everything moving forward. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Not as the little girl who needed me for everything, but as a woman finally learning what it means to take ownership of her life. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. But it was real. And real is where growth begins. Take it one step at a time, I said. She nodded. I will. There were still challenges ahead. Difficult conversations. Hard adjustments. Moments of doubt. But something important had happened today. Something that couldn't be undone. She had started thinking for herself. And I had finally stopped carrying what was never mine to hold forever. We stood there for a moment longer, not saying anything else. Because sometimes, the most important things don't need more words. They just need to be understood. And for the first time in a long time, they were. If this story touched your heart, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a story like this. And tell me honestly, what would you do if you were in this situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And one more thing. Where are you listening from? Make sure to tell me your country in the comments. I'd really love to know. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Stay strong, stay wise, and I'll see you in the next story.